Let's call the meeting to order. Dave or Susan? Oh, let's see. We're going to call the meeting to order and then we're going to approve the agenda, but we're going to move something here that's on the order of the agenda. Is that right?
Madam President, if we could move letter C, strategic plan timeline, down to what is currently number 6, and then move adjourn down to number 7.
From the consent agenda.
From the consent agenda, yes. Thank you, Vicki.
So I'll move to take item C, strategic planning timeline and funding, out of the consent agenda and put it as item number 6 on the regular agenda.
Oh, second.
So
Unless
you
that
move
was your
to
motion.
approve the agenda as amended,
As amended,
Yep.
thank you. Thank you.
seconded by
Doctor.
Vicki.
Yep. I don't think there's further discussion. So we'll move ahead.
All in favor?
Okay, all in
Voice
favor.
vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so do we have any guests here today that would like to speak? Okay, I'm just going to read this, just a real scan here since we don't have any. This is a period of time when we can hear comments from the public. Publics can't speak or criticize a specific employee. Each speaker is allotted a maximum of 3 minutes, just to be reminded. Otherwise, the speaker may be ruled out of order. We ask that you respect this request and act accordingly. It's for future guests. We've made a motion and approved. Is that correct? The order of the agenda with the amendment?
Correct.
Okay. Brock here is going to speak. Is this the right time, Brock, to approve the representative of the Kennelly Business Law Firm to act as clerk?
Madam President, actually, we will cover the changes recommended on item 5, which is the banking resolution. We still will have a member from Kennelly Law as the clerk. It's just how we will do authorizations for signing. We'll cover that in item 5 on the agenda.
Okay, that sounds good. So do we want someone like to make a motion to approve that we continue with Kennelly Business Law?
So I move that we approve a representative from Kennelly Business Law to act as the clerk.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we don't need to poll the board. All right. So we have the election of officers. Okay, this is new to me. Let's see. At this point, I will call for nominations from the members of the board. A board member could simply nominate whomever we might expect for the next president and vice president for year 2023 to 24. Does anyone have a nomination?
I nominate Joe Deutsch for president of the Fargo Park Board for the 23-24 year.
Second.
And I'll nominate, I'm sorry, I guess.
Okay, do we want to do the vice president also?
I think we have to take separate actions, right?
Separate actions, you want that?
So we could vote on president and then move on vice president
Okay.
after that.
All right, so all in favor, all in favor. Can we do that or do we need to poll the board?
I think we need to ask for further nominations.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
First.
Are there further nominations? Okay, so then let's poll the board.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
and Commissioner Deutsch will abstain from his own vote, so
Oh, come on. let him- All right, so next we have the vice president.
I'll move, we nominate Aaron Hill for vice president.
Second. Okay, any discussion, any further nominations? Poll the board.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye. Passed.
All right.
Motion carries.
Motion
Now you
carries.
guys all get to tango or, yeah.
Musical chairs.
Now we get to play musical chairs. Don.
Okay, good.
And we do
Jerry,
have.
Jerry, you can stay where you are.
Before you
All
go,
right.
before you go running off, Don, we've got a plaque for you and to thank you for your time and service with Park, or as president.
Okay.
So we're gonna, Brian, I'll take a picture real quick here. We can also take another one afterwards, but
Okay.
Michael, blocking the sign, but.
The new logo.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you, Don. for your-
Oh. Aaron's got to get all his stuff.
Okay.
Like doctor in front of my name.
It's not on its credit.
Welcome to your new status.
I'm going to lift up my seat because I'm not necessarily
All right.
really tall guy. There, how's that? Did I catch up?
Yeah, I feel like I'm shorter. Oh, there we go. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on to our consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as revised and presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Jeff, are you pulling the board? Is that right? Sorry. Jeff, please pull the board.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda, number one, recognition of audience and public comments. I believe we did that earlier, so we'll move on to number two, the director's reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few things from the operational side of the organization. Our Courts Plus group wanted to have mentioned this evening that last weekend they held the Red River Open tennis tournament. It was a great success, even despite the rain, caused a little bit of delays, but was able to get all of the games in and all the matches in, I guess is the more appropriate way to state that. And also several of the local players won their divisions, and so it made it into the championship round. So we had a very successful event there, put on by Courts Plus with Kelly and his staff. A few other construction updates for you. Just wanted to update you that the concrete trail replacement project at Village West Park is about 2/3 done. We've had great weather for our concrete project so far, so that project continues. We've also started to do the demolition at Jefferson West Park as well as McCormick Parks. Those are on our list to do as well. So that demolition started last week. So as soon as Village West is complete, the contractor will jump right into there. As I mentioned, demolition is starting. That's the first step to get the new trail placed in there. Also, if you've driven by on Main Avenue lately at the Metro, you can see the roof project is nearing completion. So that's been about a almost 2-month-long process. So there's been a lot of work there. So that project's almost done. Another roof project we have is just kicking off. That's the sports arena roof. So that project, we have a very condensed timeline due to the programming we have in that facility. So we're really hopeful that our contractors can stick to that, and we're counting on that ability for them to do so. One other thing that we want to bring your attention to is with the Emerald Ash Borer again. You heard an update from our forestry team previously We have a couple of parks where there's going to be a significant change to the trees in that park. One of them is Woodbury. The other one's Woodhaven South. In those parks, we were over 50% ash trees. And so there's going to be a considerable amount of trees that are taken out of those parks. We've sent neighborhood notifications. We've responded to a few people that have asked for more information. But just in case you hear, from some of the residents in those areas, that's part of our plan and part of what we laid out to you previously as our strategy to help mitigate the emerald ash borer. So that's all I have from the operations side. I'd be happy to entertain any questions if you have them.
So Dave, on the sports arena roof, the small window, how long will it take them? Like how long will we be down and not be able to use it?
It's going to end up being about 2 months total time.
Okay.
We are really right up against the volleyball season and the ice season. And so we're hopeful that, with good weather, our contractor is reassuring us that yes, that will be doable. So we're going to hold them to it.
Okay. And then on the emerald ash borer with those two parks, are we taking out all the ash trees or are we?
There may be a few
Reading
in there.
some of
I don't know that it's every single one, but the ones that met our criteria, which if you remember were 8 inches and smaller, were ones that we felt we could go in and remove those, and so they're not a problem down the road for us. And so I don't have that information if it's every single ash tree. I think it is because both of those parks are relatively new in the grand scheme of trees.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then are we replanting others?
We are. We're putting back a more diverse population that hopefully will withstand future threats.
And then would it be safe to assume there'd be neighborhood houses that have ash trees in their yards that the community's going to be dealing with?
Absolutely. And even we've had some residents that have their property adjacent to ours ask if they could treat some of our ash trees on our property. And so we're working through that scenario right now, but that's a little bit off of your question. But yes, absolutely. Private homeowners will be dealing with this as well.
Sure.
Where's Woodbury Park?
Woodbury Park is right, what would be the best way to describe that? East of 25th Street, or excuse me, west of 25th Street and south of I-94. Right kind of where I-29 and I-94 merge, it's right in that corner.
Okay.
I have a question. I got a call from a fellow yesterday that kind of went on, but he was wondering about the concrete. Are you doing the same thing up at Trollwood Park?
We did. That was a project of last year, and the contractor's finishing that up still this year. They had the backfilling to do and overseeding, and then there's some rock retaining walls that we're putting up there due to the ADA accessibility caused us to dig into the ground in that area, in a few of those areas at Trollwood. And so we have still some bank stabilization to do along the new trail.
Okay, because what this guy was talking about was how long it was taking. And probably because it started last year, that explains it. But he also said that there was something like 100 golfers up there last Saturday. And because of them, the work had to stop. And he and his wife were so
There
disappointed.
was a huge golf tournament at Trollwood last Saturday. I learned this because I took my son,
disc
or
golf,
disc
yeah.
golf,
Oh,
sorry.
disc golf.
I took-
Okay.
I took my son
Oh,
disc
well, I
golfing up
didn't
there
know
last
that.
Thursday. And I think what he's referring to is that then there's also concrete paths that remind me of like cart paths that run through up there. And then there's sections where just a big square section is completely removed and the rebar is sitting in there right now, but the concrete hasn't been poured in there. And so, you go, I'm terrible with distance, but you go quite some space, then there's a big chunk of the road that's out, and then it's back in again, and they're in squares. And so it's like every third or fourth square is the huge piece is completely removed, but new rebar is in there, but no concrete's been laid back over it.
And part of that is, if there's defects in the work that we've identified, we make the contractor tear it out and do it right.
Probably.
And so that's part of it. And then one thing I think, that we have to remember, especially at Trollwood, we lost about a month in the spring due to the flood. And so our contractors couldn't get back in there really until, later into May, when really we would have rather been in there in April. And so it's a concern we hear regularly, and there's no great time to do these improvements to our parks. But we're also, kind of at the discretion of the contractors a little bit. And we're getting better, I think, at pushing them and making sure that they're held to the standards that we need them to do. But certainly schedule is always something we have a challenge with.
Yeah, I think what he was talking about was that he said that he and his wife are elderly and that they always are in trepidation because they don't know what they're going to be coming up to next.
Sure.
So he also mentioned Trefoil Park, and I don't know if the same thing is happening over there or not.
No, we haven't done any work there for the last several years. That trail was put in new, I want to say, about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, well, one of the other things that he mentioned is that up in that area, there used to be benches for people to sit down on. And now he said that there are concrete pads, and I didn't know what he meant by that.
That's a strategy we're employing in some of our riverside parks, is we're laying down a section of concrete, so a concrete pad, and it gives us the availability then to bolt our benches to those, because what we have happen a lot of times, either due to floodwaters or even just other park patrons, will take those types of amenities and move them around. And so what we're trying to do is create a standard, and as goofy as this sound, a bench standard, and not only how we fasten them and how they're affixed to their location, but also the length in between of where we have benches, because we have in the past got several requests of, benches and garbage cans, and can't you just put one here? And we can, but if we answered every one of those requests, we'd have a bench every 30 to 40 feet. And so we're trying to be a little bit strategic about, the frequency at which we put them. And then the pad he's referring to is our strategy in some of those areas to keep the amenities where we want them.
Yeah, that's understandable. I hope he's listening
Yeah.
right now because you explained it very well.
Yeah. Thank you.
I got a question from left field, Dave. Any update on Island Park? You drive by it and it looks like it's quiet, but it looks like dirt and sand have been moved.
Yeah, they're still working on that, Commissioner Rosted. I agree with you. At times, it looks like not a lot is happening there. One update that will be included in the weekly update, and I believe it was even in last week's weekly update, is we were at a little bit of a standstill there for a week or so, waiting for a decision from the city. The boulevard trees on the west side of the pool, as it exists today, were meant to be saved in the project. Once we got some more information about the condition of the soil of the ground that we have there, it made us rework our foundation wall that is basically going to be the wall between the street and the pool to be constructed to a larger volume, to a wider footprint, essentially. And with that, we're now going to have to disturb those trees. So we had to go to the city, go through their meeting process. Basically, what came out of that is the city acknowledges that due to our soil conditions and the way we need to build this foundational retaining wall, that yes, they see what we're up against and we're going to have to remove those trees. With that, we're going to have to pay what the value is. I believe it was determined they're valued at about $27,000. That'll be incorporated into the project. Also within that, we will plant them back around inside Island Park at a, that's most beneficial to us actually, I believe we're doing a 3-to-1 ratio, which is the city's requirement. And then we're also going to work with the city to improve that boulevard along the west side of our pool. So that's what held us up for a little bit. That still is a consideration. It went through the Public Works Evaluation Committee, which is a collaboration of all of the city departments, and they review these sorts of requests. It will be heard on the 24th at City Commission. And once we have that, then you'll start to see some more of the outside work go on. There's still work going on inside the building, getting the building portion prepped, but from the general observance, it does give the look as we're not really doing anything.
So we're waiting on some trees.
We're waiting on the city commission's approval to uphold what the city departments have already said. This is their recommendation, correct?
And just to be clear, it's it seems like there's nobody there, but you can tell things have been done. So I don't want to say that nothing's happening. It just, you know how construction projects are, you drive by and you see like, I don't know. So I just wanted to ask. I wasn't trying to be critical.
I believe they found some concrete footings that were deeper and sort of more difficult to remove than they were anticipating as well. I believe that was part of the issue, part of the demolition issue, correct?
That's correct as well. There were some older, larger chunks of concrete that were unknown to us until we started excavation that had to be remedied. Yeah.
So do you think those were from the old arena?
I believe they probably were some sort of a foundational or footing wall for the old structure. I do believe that.
Be careful what you dig up. You might
Exactly.
Yeah, just out of general
not know what's
interest.
under there.
Toward your comment, a friend of mine who I went to high school with brought me pictures from the 1957 tornado. And they were photos her father had taken up on the north side with all of these cars that were assembled into a big field that were damaged by the tornado. And apparently they were taken up to Yunker and they were buried up there in what we call our park, which is really interesting to me. But then just recently, my neighbor down at the lake came over and he talked to me about Holy Spirit School and how the school itself, the building, is in real trouble because it's rocking and moving and it's structurally unsound and they don't know what they're going to do. And then it turned out that used to be where that school is, across from Ben Franklin, was an early landfill. So I'm just thinking, we're going to probably be finding things all over in Fargo. We just don't know all the history.
Right.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
Was that the end of the director's report, or Susan's got
Susan's
stuff
got
too?
one too.
No, I have no additional,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to number 3, board to discuss City of Fargo right-of-way acquisition for 44th Street. Dave Beats presenting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, in your packet is information relating to this issue. We did hear this issue at the last facility committee meeting. It was recommended at that meeting to bring it to the full board for more discussion and impending either rejection or approval of the city's road right-of-way purchase. Excuse me, as part of this presentation, we do have Blake Nybach and Brian Reinertz in the audience from Epic. I'll ask them to come up here in just a minute. I'll run through the information as at the facility committee meeting. It was requested that we come up with some additional information. If you remember at our Anderson-Theraldson complex, there was a long-standing discussion between the city and Park District as well as Epic about a potential road right-of-way that was going to cut through our complex. That went on for a while. That plan was abandoned for a various multitude of reasons. And most recently, we've picked up conversations again over the course of the last year and a half or so about a potential different road right-of-way that would infringe a little bit onto Park District property. So the image on the screen right now shows on the very right-hand side what is being proposed by the city. And it would be a road right-of-way purchase. The city is offering to buy 40 feet of our property to accommodate this roadway. Epic is also willing to pay for an additional 6 feet of our property to make this roadway best fit in this footprint. What that means to us is it has a little bit of a significance in a few different ways. Right now, our current maintenance and irrigation building is in this road right-of-way area. So if we are to approve this item, we're going to have to do something with that building. In that building right now is our maintenance for the ball fields that still exist on the site. And also it houses our irrigation for the west half of this facility. Staff has gone to work and we thought, if this happens, where would this building be best located? The option we came up with is we could move this building out of the road right-of-way as it's presented. We could rebuild a new building on the corner of Cornerstone Bank Arena, in the southwest corner of Cornerstone Bank Arena. which would not only improve our facility, but also maybe make it a little bit more appealing from Epic's build site into our property. So we looked at that option. The other option we would have to do is it wouldn't work to put our irrigation portion of that building in that location. So we looked at, well, what if we built a smaller irrigation building? And if you can picture yourself driving down 42nd Street, we have a small 12 by 14 foot building there that houses our irrigation for the east half of the complex. We basically mimic that in this proposal and build a small building like that outside of the road right-of-way footprint. And then we could achieve and essentially become whole again as far as an operational side. We covered at the facility committee meeting, those anticipated costs to the park district at that time were around $450,000 for the building and around $100,000 for our irrigation. So with that known, that's where we were. Going back then to the city's road right away, that's how this equation is the best way I've described it to folks. That's how that started for us. About 10, 12 weeks ago, we learned from the city that the construction of this road is now going to require participation from us in order to happen. So when we found out what that amount was, it was estimated to be about $1,070,000. So just about 1.1 million. So all told, you know, adding all those expenses up, it starts to look like, well, wait a minute, this turned into a much bigger project than what we thought, and we acknowledge that. But as mentioned, Epic has come forward and said, listen, we see this, Park District. We understand that, you know, you have this expense now that you're looking at. And so they've said, we'll pay you $37,000, which is the 6 feet of right of way that the city won't buy from us. And we'll also, you know, work to give you $100,000 towards your irrigation, because that can be absorbed into part of this project we learned from the city. And so all told, they're willing to say, we're willing to come with that $137,000 mark. If you take that and then you add that to what the city is willing to do, the city is willing to purchase the 40 feet of right-of-way at a price just under $250,000. So if you take all of the considerations into mind here, if we reduced what we would get from city and from Epic, we're still looking at about $1.2 million in totality of expense to achieve this. Commissioner Rosted asked at the facility meeting that we investigate what would the carrying cost or the financing costs of the road construction, because we do have that option with the city. The road itself for the $1,070,000, we could special assess back to ourselves essentially and have that paid for over a 20-year period. I worked with Brock and he said, well, let's use just a rough 3.75 carrying costs. That's all variable, so this is just to give you an idea of what it could potentially be. Using that calculation, that added $450,000 of carrying cost to that $1,070,000 over the 20 years. So basically what we're really looking at here today is either to approve the road right-of-way acquisition from the city of Fargo or to deny it. And maybe I'll ask Blake and Brian to come up and talk to you now before we actually go into asking for any action on this item.
Dave, what was the number again of the 3.75% over 20 years? What did that add up to be?
Just about $450,000. Yep.
In interest.
Yeah, correct, yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you all for having me today. Board members, I want to just thank you for your consideration on this item. We are hoping that you will consider approving this plat as it's been proposed. You know, we've been working on this design for quite some time, as Mr. Beets mentioned, and not moving forward, you know, would have a pretty substantial negative impact on us schedule-wise at this time. You know, we're hoping to break ground in the next month with our water park project, and so you know, any delays at this point, you know, could have a pretty substantial negative impact for us. But if I could, I'd like to give a couple things to consider. We put just a few slides together here, and I just wanted to make sure, you know, like what Dave had in the packet, we know the area that we're talking about here. But I'd also like to give a little background of why we're here. You know, when we were awarded this opportunity to acquire the property, you know, I think almost 3 years ago now, we came with a vision. And I believe that's one of the main reasons why we were successful in getting the opportunity to acquire the property. I believe our proposal was favored over the competition because we were going to offer more than just the typical development. We committed to maintaining approximately 4 acres of public space in the center of our development. We agreed to making some connections with the 45th Street Trail and tying into the park complex to the east of us, and really trying to create a destination here and go above and beyond the typical commercial development that could have happened. This vision is ready to move forward. We're at the point right now where we've got over $18 million of capital raised for the water park project. We just had a meeting with the City of Fargo Economic Development Incentive Committee. They had a subcommittee meeting this morning. That's going to be going ahead to their next meeting next week. And then we're hoping to be on their city commission agenda on July 24th. So things are moving forward. We're ready to go. And we've got a lot of investors who believe in this project and creating an amenity like this for the community. In talking about the street itself, the street that we've designed has got the ability to shut it down on both the north and the south end of it. At one time when we were talking about the right-of-way going through all the way to 42nd, there was also talks of potentially a new, tournament facility coming up over here. So we kind of designed it so that we had the ability to shut it down on both ends and use that as really a transformable hardscape where you could do everything from, game day events, fan festivals, street fairs, farmers markets, art displays. Again, looking at the big picture of what our master plan for this development can do. We've designed the water park hotel facility to have a rooftop patio for the bar and restaurant that's going there. That'll be overlooking not only the park, but onto our property as well. And so again, pedestrian connectivity from the 45th Street Trail system through the public park on our property and into the Park District property. Looking at connectivity with the Cornerstone Bank Arena parking lot, with our ramp that's being proposed through this pilot program. Everything from a potential Skyway connection from the ramp for the Park District users into the Cornerstone Arena if it works out, and if not, just the benefit of the additional parking there. And these are just some slides that we've put together that show some inspirational pieces of what is going to look like and some of the design intent. Some of these are local here, and some of them are just other inspirational pieces that we've looked at. And again, I think the energy of this overall development, benefits to the zoo, benefits to the Park District, and just kind of creating a quality of life amenity, for the entire public to enjoy. In addition to that, our development overall, it's a high density development. And one of the main benefits of that is the additional taxable dollars that come in through this type of development. What I mentioned, the ramp project, if that pilot gets approved as we're hoping to by the end of this month here, that allows us to do an additional $80 million of development on the south half of our property by replacing what would be required in surface parking for the first phases of our development as they come online. So that's a pretty substantial impact when you look at taxable dollars. When we're fully built out, we're projecting over $180 million of development just on this 17-acre site. You look at that in terms of annual tax dollars, and it's $2.3 million annually is what we're projecting once everything comes online. At the current tax rate, I believe the Park District's portion of that would be close to $300,000 given the current mill rate. And then our first building that's coming online this fall, the mock building, if you drive down 45th Street, you'll see the two buildings that are 7 stories right now. That's a $36 million project. So when the first year that comes online with taxable dollars, that's going to be approximately $450,000 annually. And I think the Park District's portion of that should be about $60,000 if I did my simple math correct on that. Mr. Beats mentioned the kind of the 2 anomalies of the project that we've offered to pay for. I just wanted to mention a couple other things. The existing stretch of 24th Street, or 24th Avenue, if we go back to that, this was assessed 100% to our property. This is public right away, just like the dead end right away that the city of Fargo has down here.
But this portion of it was assessed 100% just to our property. So there's public benefit there already. I was there at a baseball game for my son last night. He had a doubleheader, and to get to fields 5, 6, 7, and 8 over there, that's the closest parking spots right there. It's pretty close to here, but I'd say there was probably 30 cars there last night. So I think the public's already getting some benefit out of this. And so I just wanted to mention those items, and I hope that those will be considered as you're, considering the right-of-way project itself. So be happy to answer any questions, and I guess if I can do it from here, this is a video that just gives a little perspective of some renderings that we put together for the entire project, which gives a good overview of what we're looking at here.
This is the avenue.
So this is going down 24th Street. So we look to the north there at the future hotel and the parking ramp, and then this is the water park, the Skyway connection from the ramp to the water park and hotel development, and then an overview of the public space in the middle there. So. Again, thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to address any questions if there were any for me.
Well, I think it's a lot to take in at a board meeting, and our original, proposal that we had on the plate was, I know personally, I don't have the appetite for taking on an expense for a road that we don't necessarily need at this time. That's not an Epic thing, that's a us thing. We don't have any problem with your ideas, and I think they're all great. But I think it's something we probably need to discuss further, what we're going to do. But I know that I can't support the Park District incurring the expenses that would happen with taking on this road. What would be assessed to us?
I'd just like to ask Dave Beets if there are benefits to us.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Yes, I do think there are some benefits to us, and with the ability to clean up the site and create a nice pathway into our property from Epic's, we would gain some circulation, certainly with the trail that's being proposed on the east side of the road as you see it. There's additional parking. Blake mentioned, parking's a challenge out there already for us. And I failed to mention that, and I'm glad Blake did in his presentation of the parking garage itself. And I know Commissioner Deutsch brought that up at the last facility meeting, that to make sure that we work together and try and have that connection brought in as well. And so I do think there's those benefits there. I am also very sympathetic that, this, again, I say it as this formula kind of changed on us, and it wasn't necessarily Epic changing it. It wasn't us changing it. City came with some information that we were told there was dollars for this construction project, and then, most recently we were told there weren't. And so I also appreciate that. But to answer the question, I believe there are some benefits there. I believe that, the vision that's been shown is a good one, and ultimately, the decision is that enough? Is that enough from what we were led to believe initially?
So is the city requiring that road? Like, is this additional road, or is it?
It's not being required, but they did express interest in connecting their two dead-end right-of-ways that they had. If you go back a year and a half, we could do it either as a public right-of-way project. If the right-of-way project went all the way through to 42nd Street, we were going to make probably a private drive connection there. But for the last 6 months or so, I think when we first, or most recently, got those estimates from engineering department, Tom Knockmoose, with the right-of-way acquisition stuff, this has been the most recent design that we've been considering. And again, I think looking at the magnitude of the development and all of what we see as the public benefit that's going to happen there, I think it's going to be a true destination, and to have it be done as a public right-of-way as opposed to, a smaller private drive that doesn't have any parking on it and it doesn't quite have the benefit there. We just felt that this was the better option.
It seems to me that one of the greatest frustrations that I have is if I come into a place where I'm expecting to park and all of a sudden I run into a dead end if I am able to park, and having to turn around and go back the other way. I think that, the flow of traffic is always an important thing in construction of any project. You don't want to create the frustration that is entailed by dead ends. So that's kind of my perspective. And I would, in addition to that, where I wouldn't probably have an opinion about the cost, I'd like to ask Brock how he sees this how it would fit into our budget.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Certainly, as we're preparing the 2024 budget, we have had this sitting out there as something that is new to that formula in the last few weeks. We do not currently have not made consideration or concession for this in 2024. So if we're going to do that, we would have to discuss what does that look like. We ran a simple amortization, which we talked about. If we were to put that out there over 20 years, the question becomes, would we want to do that? Or would we want to have some different consideration for how we might pay for that and not stretch that out to avoid the cost of the financing charge for that? So, I think it's like anything when we look at our budget. We have a budget meeting tomorrow, and you're going to discover that the preliminary budget is currently in the red, and we've got some work to do to balance that. If this is a consideration that should or is desired to be made, we would have to make additional consideration to be able to balance that. So can it work in our budget? Certainly. It's a matter of prioritization, and it's a matter of choosing which things take higher priority at what time, and then give us our direction, and we will fit it in accordingly. Much like we do with any item that comes our way in budget requests.
Thank you.
Blake, how many parking spots would this be? The right of way? How many additional parking spots would it be?
That's a great question. I don't know. Oh,
50, what was it, 57?
57 just on the 44th Street. And then the ramp that's been designed right now, that's a 500 space ramp. And how we've proposed it to the city is that that'll be 100% free and open to the public. So, unlike some that are owned by the city where at different times that you have to pay for it, sometimes it's open. We're proposing that would be 100% free and open to the public.
Is the ramp a separate situation from this right of way? Is there any connection at all between the two?
Yeah, it is separate from this right of way. So right now, the plat was preliminarily approved at Planning Commission last week. And so, pending Park District approval signing off on this, that plat's ready to be finalized. The ramp is separate in terms that that's part of our pilot request that we have with the city of Fargo. So that's separate. But again, in terms of us moving forward with our project, we need a platted lot to pull a permit on, and we need a solution to how the right of way or how the road is going to be completed.
So we don't know for certain that the parking ramp's going in. Is that right?
We don't know.
You're
Yeah,
still-
correct.
you're
Yeah,
still
we're
wait-
still
you're
waiting
still
on
waiting on
final
approval.
approval. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mr. President, can I ask a question? So as we think about the cost recovery of the tax base as you walk through, and I haven't crunched all those numbers because I didn't know what all of those dollar values were, so I appreciate you bringing that. What's the time frame on that? Because that's certainly recovery over time. And of
Yep.
course, anytime there's incentive financing, those things kick in at a different time, and also when they come online. So do you have a
Yeah.
general sense of when those start to hit where we would see recovery of?
Yeah,
those
I mean,
costs?
I think you'll start to see it next year. Our first mock building that's coming online, that's the one I mentioned. That's a $36 million project. That's coming online this fall. That'll open up probably in October. The first building, it's technically two separate buildings. One will come online probably in October. The other one probably will follow a couple months just after that. But again, so I would think that, within the next tax cycle, within the next year of that being, reassessed as a completed project, that $450,000 would come through as paid property taxes, and you guys would get your portion of that. Yeah.
And I guess when I was, again, doing my simple math, if that $1 million was amortized, if it's, 50 to 60 grand, I think that even that first building coming online should make that almost a net neutral impact to the park district for those dollars. And then the rest of the development, so we've requested that as part of the pilot project to pay for the ramp, the water park and hotel project would get a 17-year pilot where they're just paying the base level taxes on those right now. But then the lots to the south, that's where we talked about that additional $78 million of development. If we did it similar to how we did at the lights, those buildings would probably come on, one start construction probably within a year or so. They're typically 2-year projects, so I would think we would be fully built out within 5 or 6 years.
How many days do you foresee using the road as a plaza, for a simple term?
Probably a handful per year. I'm not sure how many special events would be there. Obviously we've got some park space on our side as well. If I look at a right-of-way project that was designed similar to this, like in West Fargo, between the street fairs, the car shows that they have there, the cruise nights, I would say at least a handful of nights throughout a summer. And then again, depending on what happens, if there's a new tournament facility or anything like that, that would be developed on the park side of things, I would think that would increase that use maybe.
Sure. Well, I mean, your ideas are great. I think, your ambition is great. It's inspiring. A lot of exciting things coming. It's the bill for us. I mean, that's what I come down to is this is a road we didn't necessarily ask for. We don't have a set plan for why we'd use it necessarily. If we had our Anderson piece that we have, and we knew, okay, we're putting this here and this road is really going to be useful for this, it would be a lot easier to deal with and say, okay, maybe. But we're selling park property to gain a bill. And that's kind of hard for me to take on. And a lot of money, not just a little bit of money. So I don't know that the benefit of the road to us is equal to the price we would end up paying. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I think I kind of totaled it. It looked like it was about 1,685,000, right? If we round it up with the interest over 20 years. So even if it's a $60,000 sort of tax increase every year, I mean, even I just mathed that out, that would take 28 years essentially to kind of pay that back if you think about it, right?
Provided everything develops at the rate
Right,
that it's
right.
supposed to too. I appreciate, as Vicky said, the economic impact that we're talking about. What concerns me is that the city, closed the TIF, and I guess I haven't heard. I'm sorry, and I guess I haven't heard. It just seems like unless I'm missing something that the bill is just being shifted to us, and we're supposed to take it on because of the economic impact it has on the community. And I just don't understand, I guess, necessarily why the city changed the TIF situation. Does anybody have that answer for us at all, or?
I believe, Commissioner Deutsch, I believe what we were told is one of the projects that the retiring finance director had was to clean up some of these loose ends. The TIF that was being alluded to for the last several years was one that was created years before that. And so I'm led to believe that one of the items that got cleaned up essentially was this item. And therefore, what we had been banking on, for lack of a better way to describe that, is those dollars being available for the potential road construction when it happened, basically got kind of zeroed out and said, well, we haven't used this and we don't have a clear plan to use it right now. So that's what I'm led to believe from the city side that's how that happened.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of economic development and, entrepreneur, business owner, and it just feels like, for lack of better words, like it just stinks for you guys to kind of have this plan and then be put in this position all of a sudden where now you're kind of trying to figure out how to get this all put together. And I think I like that we're trying to find a solution and we're trying to work with Epic and figure something out. But I mean, at this point, even a $1.6 million price tag with a potential budget shortfall, I mean, I think we would have to, I don't even know, approving this type of a dollar amount at this point, I think it seems pretty difficult. But what I wanted to ask too is, so what happens, I know you said your timeline or Epic's timeline will get pushed off, but so if we take kind of no action at this meeting or kind of decline, whatever, what are your next steps? What are Epic's next steps to?
Yeah, I
after
mean,
that?
we'll have to figure out a solution so that we can get an approved plat. I mean, I think the immediate impact is it's certainly going to cause, somewhat of a delay, barring, maybe a couple of additional special meetings, so that we could get an approved plat. I think we have the ability to move forward with parts of the project without this plat done. The parking ramp is separate from this plat because it's north of the right of way. That's a lot that we control where this really doesn't have any impact on that. So, I think there's the potential where we could, find a different solution if there's one needed, but I think we'd have to be pretty diligent in trying to find that solution, whether that's a revised right-of-way section that has maybe a smaller footprint. I'm sure that there's some alternatives that could be drawn up to reduce the cost. So I think we'd have to kind of go back to the drawing board, I guess, for lack of terms, for what to do with this potential street section then.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that, of course, a road, especially in its position in the plan, isn't, one of those glittery kind of things that everyone says, let's vote for it, let's do it, it sounds great, but when we add millions of dollars to the sports complex, everybody says, oh, that sounds wonderful. Let's just add that to our budget. And if we look at why we have a budget shortfall, we might look at some of the ways in which we've been approaching the use of funds. So, recently we've added to the expense of the sports complex, whereas it's been my point for some time that we've been ignoring some of the other things that may not have so much glitter on them, but still are part of our responsibilities, or say our responsibilities maybe to the community. Whether this road fits into that or not is questionable, but at the same time, I don't think we should put our eggs in one basket as what we've been doing for some time now. So just a comment, if I had my checkbook with me, I'd write you a check.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I think Jerry likes to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what's been talked about. I would like to make the point that we first learned about this 13 days ago. And so I don't know in my time on the board that we made $1 million decision in 13 days. We've spent a lot of time talking about those kinds of decisions before we pulled the trigger. And that's that's pretty fast train to jump on, and without really having time to think through it, and so that's a concern of mine as well.
When I first got on the board, we had a situation out at Shields Arena where they got bad information per se that they were going to get tax exempt status on the building, and at the maybe 13-day mark, they found out that wasn't going to be the case. And so we ended up in a very short period of time taking ownership of that property to provide that tax exempt status for them. with the notion that, we were going to be getting several sheets of ice that were supposed to come with that. My point in that is there's not similar stories, but they are similar stories in the context that we're being asked to make a huge decision in a very short period of time for the good of the cause. And the hard part is that I'm feeling like other entities could have been involved in the good of the cause, and right now it's sitting square in our laps, and that's very unfortunate for us. Because I empathize with you guys 100%. This is not your fault. I mean, it's nothing that you guys did as the developer to create this, and you're doing what you can right now to try to move forward 100% with the project. But it just puts us in a very precarious position.
Well, I like the idea of we kind of keep working, can we keep the discussion going and keep potentially kind of get city involvement or whoever else to kind of keep discussing this? So not saying we absolutely 100% won't, but at this time, basically not taking any formal action on this item today.
I wonder if we have to reject the offer that's been made and then ask if someone wants to propose something else at a future meeting. Would that
don't think-
sound
I
right?
don't think there is an offer that's been made. I think it's a point of discussion, a presentation, isn't it? So,
Yeah, if we wanted to approve sort of this general concept, then I think we could take formal action tonight. But I think if we don't want to move forward with that, I don't think we necessarily need formal action unless I'm.
I think
Correct.
it has the same result if no action is taken, where then we'll continue to work with Epic and the city and try to, refine this to something else other than what's under consideration right now, and allow more time, because really our process is a little bit different from the city, because the city's process was to get the plat redrawn, and then our approval of what the city's proposing to pay us for the road right away dovetails into that and would have had that impact then to basically say, well, yes, we're approving the plat by accepting the proposal from the city. So in my mind, and I don't know if Jeff needs to weigh in, but I think by taking no action, it has the same result as if we decline it right now. Is, to Blake's words, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and look at this a different way.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think the city found itself in a position it didn't anticipate too, with the finance director moving ahead and kind of cleaning up the loose ends. That might be something we could speak to the city about too, and if there's any room there for consideration. So it's possible that the project could move ahead, but probably it's important to find out how we can move forward with all of those involved. And that's what you're proposing.
Correct.
Okay.
I hear the terms clean things up and loose ends used, but at the same time, if the city is involved in this process with purchasing and whatever else, they obviously are supportive of it. So I guess I would like to understand why they can't still be a part of the project per se.
Yeah, I think they can. And in fact, I think the finance director was fired, wasn't she? And that was the reason that things just kind of sloughed along at that point. And I think there is room for further discussion.
And I apologize and empathize with you guys because this is not what you want to hear, because this is going to shut you down. But I feel unfortunately like we're at the end of the chain, and we happen to be the last person that's going to cause this situation for you. But at the same time, we've been playing along in this scenario with the notion that we were going to come out in the wash at zero essentially, and now we're talking about a considerable dollar amount that.
Yeah, and I guess from our perspective, I mean, I'll do whatever we can to, whether it's coming up with some options or alternatives to, potentially reduce the scope or the impact of the project. I'm confident that we can come up with something. And if it's a desire of the board, I'd be happy to keep working with Dave and staff to, see what some of those alternatives are so that we can get those back in front of you for further consideration.
That'd be great.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Blake.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blake.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your input on that. Number 3, moving on to number 4, board to consider approval of updates to procurement policy number 390. Luke Evenson, our presenter. Woo, look at that suit and everything.
Thanks, Board President. Today, we're coming to you with just some updates to a current policy that the Park District has in place. This is our procurement policy, number 390. Our procurement policy basically details some rules and guidelines for how the Park District makes purchases. They are approval steps. They are also follow state and federal guidelines for taking bids and quotes and things like that. The only changes that we are making to this policy pertain to the internal approval side of things. So the biggest 3 changes that we are going to make, or what I'm trying to present today, would be that all purchases do need an approver, no matter the level that they're made at. And then a dollar amount for 2,500 would be an approval for anything over that exceeds that dollar amount. And then finally, the $10,000 amount would be for the finance director to approve. Currently, we only have a $750 threshold. That's only at the director level. So those are the only 3 main updates. The other 4 updates in the bullets that you see are just updating the wording to present the 3 that I highlighted. So we did present this at the admin committee meeting on June 14th, and it was asked to bring to full board here tonight. So with that, the policy is actually attached as well if you want to see my changes in red text. But answer any questions if you have them now.
Yeah, as we discussed, sorry, Aaron. As we discussed at the administration meeting, it was really tightening things up, which is nice, and giving you more checks and balances of keeping track and making sure proper purchases are being made and people are checking on purchases that are being made. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I applaud you for wanting to button things up tighter. So it's good.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think one of the issues that we've heard a lot was prior to this process, a check would be written and then it wouldn't sort of be looked at until after the check was already had gone out. So you could potentially put a stop pay on it or something like that. But I think this sort of puts that, you can have a discussion about an expenditure prior to the check being written and discussed at that time. And I think the other big advantage is not just having everything go to the business office and having the business office sort of be the one to regulate it, but getting the supervisors more involved on the day-to-day basis.
Mr. President, members of the board, the other thing I think that's noteworthy is Luke and his team, we did work with the director team on this. We vetted it through there, got some advice and suggestions of what level seems to make sense and what does that mean to them. Worked with the executive team. So I think there was a grassroots effort here where we wanted to find out what will work for you and how can we make this more efficient, yet at the same time provide some checks and balances. So this certainly is not anointed and handed down from the finance team. This was an effort to say, help us help you and make sure that we've protected everybody. So there was good feedback through the process as well.
Yeah, well vetted and well
That's nice.
discussed. Yep. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the updates to the procurement policy 390 as presented.
Second.
It's been
I'd
moved
like
and
to
seconded.
add that I'm not a big fan of procurement policies because you got to know the rules, and if you don't know the rules, you get yourself into trouble. But on the other hand, I say that jokingly because I think it's important to have controls in place so that it protects the employee that's making the purchase every bit as much as it affects the organization and protects the organization. So glad you did it, and the process was outstanding to involve staff and getting their input. So I like that a lot.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the updates to the procurement policy for number 390. Is there any other discussion? Any other discussion? Jeff, please pull the board.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Luke. Appreciate your hard work. Moving on to number 5, board to consider approval of the bank resolution. Brock Leeds presenting.
All right, Mr. President, members of the board, I also want to thank Luke and our team for the work they did on that policy. And I think it's a nice step, and they don't always get recognized for the things they're doing behind the scenes. So thank you, Luke, for that. The item number 5 is really a standard procedure we do every year as we have change in officers, because we have internal processes in place in which we require 3 signatures on our general checking account with Bremer Bank. Bremer Bank is our primary relationship checking account in which we run our daily operations through. So every year at this time, when we have a change in officers, we then pass a banking resolution and get the appropriate signatures. In reviewing this time, the finance department really dug into, since the packet came out, between the packet coming out and now, dug into procedurally, what makes sense. And we had some questions about the fact that in the past, the clerk has been the executive director. And currently, as action was taken tonight, the clerk is now our outside legal counsel. And really that raised the question in our mind, and I visited with Jeff about this prior to the meeting. Is it logical that we would have an external entity having signing authority on our daily operational accounts for the bank? And in Luke's work prior, auditing public entities, some require 2, some require 3. We are requiring 3 signatures, but there's not a set standard for that. It would be our recommendation that we alter the motion that's in front of you, and that we would ask you to consider and approve designating the president and the treasurer as signers on the general checking account, and eliminating the need for the signature of the clerk. And again, primarily that is to not have a non-employee outside entity signing checks for a public entity, taxing entity. The other thing is it still provides a check and balance, because it's the president of the board, an elected official, and the director of finance as the treasurer. So it's not 2 in-house people sitting here every day. It gives you that check and balance still as we go forward. So a standard procedure that we would suggest has a minor modification, more so because we've had a change in the position of clerk and how that functions. So we would, I'll stand for any questions you may have, and would ask you to approve the motion as amended, in essence, crossing out the word clerk and inserting the word treasurer.
Who possesses the president's stamp, signature stamp?
The business office, correct? Yes, we,
The office would act on the behalf of the president, correct?
correct.
For
And
payroll
really,
checks and
yep.
things
And it
like
really,
that.
as a result of you approving, as you see in your packet, all the expenses that come through. So you take action, and then it has the signature stamp of the president and the finance director. Yep, that is correct.
And do we have any thoughts about it being 2 people instead of 3 people?
So I would just say, in my history and working in a variety of public sectors, I'm used to it being 2, which is the president of the board and whoever the chief finance person is, business manager, finance director, et cetera. It made note to me today, we received a check from West Fargo Public Schools, and they made special note to realize it was 2 signatures, and it was the president and the finance person. So I think there's no standard. I would tell you, we've gone the extra mile in having an additional check and balance by having 3. I think if you have 2 and it is an elected member, still meets that criteria from any audit perspective and things of that nature. And more than anything, if it's going to be 3, then I would suggest that you have it be the president of the board, the treasurer of the board, and the executive director of the district, just so it's not an outside entity. I think that was really what raised the question more than anything for us. And when I asked Jeff about it, I don't want to speak for him, but also thought, yeah, that seems a little interesting that
And
that's
on
the
our
case.
foundation board, we have the executive director and then the president, the board president, right? Just those
Correct.
two signers. I know we
Yep.
just approved that.
That is correct.
Very,
I
very
just
common.
noticed that in recent years, probably the last 10 years or so, that third signer has kind of gone away. It used to be something that was required basically by nonprofits, but I think that's changed and the two signatures are a lot cleaner way of doing business. So I'd be in favor of the change.
Would anybody like to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bank resolution designating the president. So this would be the president and the treasurer as signers of the general checking account, correct?
I'd like to second that.
It's been moved and seconded to designate the president and treasurer as the two signees. Update to reflect that. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Jeff, please pull the board.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch.
Aye, motion carries.
Mr. President, we will then change the document that's in your packet and get the appropriate names on it, and then we'll just make arrangements with you to get your signature.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, moving on to new item number 6, strategic plan, timeline, and funding. Susan, presenting.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. So this item was discussed at the June 28th Facilities Committee meeting. The strategic plan is going to establish a clear and concise vision for the Park District that will move us forward by creating, measurable goals and objectives that will help us reach the desired outcomes. We really believe that the Park District will benefit from moving forward with the strategic planning process. We feel that it'll help us in making decisions and prioritizing the funding requests that we've received. Elements that would be included in the strategic plan, it would include reevaluating our mission, vision, and values. It would provide the strategic goals and objectives, the measurable outcomes, and that would include also a timeline on when we would be implementing those goals and objectives, and provide an annual operational plan that staff can utilize to move everything forward. So we're requesting approval from the board tonight to solicit requests for proposals for consulting services to lead us through the process. And then also we're asking approval to reallocate budgeted funds to pay for the strategic planning process. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have an estimate? Do you have an estimate about the length of time the planning process will be?
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. That's a great question. We're anticipating that the planning process could take up to 6 to 8 months. I think it's really going to depend on the consultant that's selected. There was some work that has been done in previous years on a strategic plan. So whether we are starting from, ground zero, if we're just reassessing some of that work, I think will determine what that timeline is. But we wouldn't anticipate it taking any longer than that 6 to 8 months. And also I'd like to add that it could depend on the consultant and any other projects that they may be working on too.
I'm familiar with the idea of looking at previous strategic plans and updating them and changing them according to how society and organizations are run too. It's really interesting to me to think about the planning process and especially how long it might be. But I would hope that we would come out with a wonderful product. And I've been on a lot of committees that have been formulating this and that sort of document, and they so many times seem unnecessarily long.
I don't know if you've had that experience.
Yes, yeah.
I'll just add that, to me, the strategic plan is the board's plan. We're a governance body and, we need to have a strategic plan in place that guides how we govern and make our decisions as a board. So even though the staff will be participating and doing some of the heavy lifting here, this is the board's plan. And so I think this is critical that we have a strategic plan in place so we can measure performance and we can measure, that we're going in the directions that we want to go.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rosted. I know I think I was part of the reason that maybe got bumped out to the regular agenda, just of concern of not having an executive director right now, and potentially, do we want to maybe wait and hold off? And I think, after kind of thinking about it and discussing it, I think I would agree with that assessment that it's more of a board plan. And then even the entire discussion on the right of way discussion, I kept thinking, well, if we had a strategic plan, we could say, does that fall in our strategic plan? And if the answer is no, then that's our answer. If yes, then we should find a way. So I'm in favor of moving forward with the strategic plan.
Do you want to make a motion then?
Oh, sure, why not? So I would,
Excuse.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yes.
Commissioners, real quick, I just wanted to, thank you, Mr. Beats. Just wanted to highlight that we have updated the timeline a bit because we wanted to make sure that there was adequate time to advertise the request for proposal. So just some key dates is that request for proposal would be released on July 26th. The closing date would be August 18th. We would conduct interviews September 6th through the 8th. It would come back to the Facilities Committee at the September 20th meeting, and then the board would approve that final,
Proposal.
Thank you, consultant. I couldn't find my word. Consultant at the October board meeting.
Thank you. All right, so motion to approve the strategic plan, timeline, and funding as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the strategic plan, timeline, and funding source as presented. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Jeff, please pull the board.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch.
Aye, motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
See y'all. Have a good night.